mean, actually, I thought I was going to go into film, and I found that my degree in broadcasting and film qualified me to drive whatever color cab I wanted,
Right.
So I thought that if I was going to be unemployed, it'd be best to move out of the country since I had spent all my parents' money going to college. I moved to London in 1984, 83 actually, and fell in love with beer over there. So who knew that beer could actually be something flavorful, interesting, complex, etc. I thought I was drinking beer in college, but in fact, I was drinking a mass market version, which was kind of like eating Wonder Bread and thinking that you'd had bread. So I went traveling over Europe. I got back, and I said, okay, I can't drink the mass market beer anymore. Started making beer at home. And in 1989, eventually, I left a very cushy job that I was working in and went to work for 75% less money for a place called Manhattan Brewing Company that was based in Soho. And I was the apprentice to a guy named Mark Whitty, who had run the rather famous Samuel Smith Brewery in Tadcaster, England. And that was the start. I became head brewer there a few years later and came to Brooklyn Brewery in '94 really to build this.
Right.
Well, I knew Steve and Tom, from all of our early days as home brewers. So we were all friends, and they always had said, well, one of these days you have to come work with us. But, we didn't have the brewery here yet, and I had other ambitions. I was going to open up a series of brew pubs. There was all this stuff going on. And finally, Steve talked me into it, and we did Black Chocolate Stout together in 1994. And shortly thereafter, I came on full time at the brewery.
Mm-hmm.
What's amazing is watching what's happened to Williamsburg, of course. Now, I used to go to raves around here. There was a thing called the Praying Mantis. It was in the old mustard factory that's now gone.
Yeah.
We used to have events in all these empty buildings around here. When I first started working here, there was not a single ATM in Williamsburg. If you needed money, you had to get on a train, and leave the neighborhood, in order to do it. There were one or two restaurants, and it's a completely different place. This was built out in 1996. It didn't look like this in 1996. In fact, it transformed over the last year. So all this equipment that you see behind me, all this from Germany. It's pretty new. It came in a year ago, and we've been operating it since only January. Right. So it's only a matter of months at this point. And we've just wrapped around the block now. Well, we added 16,000 square feet, which is a lot of space. Eventually, once we put in more tanks than we even have now, right now we're at about 40,000 barrels of capacity. By the time we put in more tanks, we'll actually be up to about 100,000 barrels of capacity, and that will finally max out, this space. So, we're going to be doing a lot of things. There are always experiments going on. We're expanding our Brewmaster's Reserve line of specialty beers that we bring out every few months. We're bringing some beers that we currently brew upstate back in-house. And we're brewing more of the things we've already been brewing here. For example, it's been years since we were able to put on a new line somewhere of our East India Pale Ale, our IPA.
Right.
So the salespeople wanted to sell it, and people wanted it, but we couldn't produce anymore because we were only in these four walls. And now that we have, more tankage, more equipment, more people, we're able to do that. So, nobody wants a recession, but we did find a small silver lining, in the property market. It was pretty hot back then. If you wanted, we looked for 7 years for a new space, and it turned out it was right on the other side of the wall. Well, we've always had tours. I think that a brewery is, in a way, like the cockpit of an airplane. It doesn't really matter who you are. You can be president of the United States. Everybody wants to see the inside of a cockpit of an airplane. Everybody wants to see a brewery. And so, in fact, we find that if we leave a door around here, even slightly ajar, people will try to make their way into the building by whatever method they can. So we definitely know there's a lot of curiosity. And actually, the design of the front of the building, the new design of the front of the building was my idea. You might note that there are little windows, but they're positioned in a way such that people would be frustrated. So, there's like one window that's 2 feet off the ground, and people get down on their knees and they're looking, and all they see is pipe work. Because everybody was always looking at us like we were monkeys. So we're like, okay, we'll give you a window, but you won't really be able to see anything. What I want to have then is eventually is a camera that shows people outside trying to see in, and for people who are inside drinking beer to actually watch them on on a closed loop television.
That's pretty
but
funny.
but we're not, we're not cruel. Of course, we are going to have people in here, and we do want to show them a good time. And you basically have two different ways to to engage the brewery. You have the party option and the intellectual option.
Right.
The party option is Friday night. Probably Friday night actually removes information rather than giving it to you. You may walk out knowing less than you did when you came in, but you're going to have a good evening. Always a lot of fun. 6 to 11. Everybody and their kids and their dogs and the whole neighborhood in here, and that's great. On Saturday and Sunday, we have tours, for the general public, and those basically are showing people, how we're making beer and taking them through the facility. A recent development is what we call the small batch tour, which happens at 5 o'clock Monday through Thursday. This you have to sign up for in advance through the website, brooklynbrewery.com. It does sell out, well in advance, so you have to think ahead for that one, but it's limited to only 20 people. And in that, you get an in-depth tour and then a tasting at the end. It costs $8, which of course in New York is essentially free.
Right.
Those are the three ways to come see us. It's always interesting for us trying to figure out how to dodge around the fact that we have people in here a lot these days. These days we're actually working late into the evening, sometimes till 10 o'clock. So we'll have a tour go through and we have to set up to make sure, that the people who are going through don't get in the way of operations. And of course that nobody who comes through here, gets hurt or trips over something or whatever. Well, we just take the idea of what we do anyway, which is making beers that we want to drink, and take that a little bit further. Often it will be inspired by something like, for example, Mary's got 500 acres of maple trees. How cool is that? What can we do with all that maple syrup? So the idea of a maple porter. We made a beer a few years ago called Cuvée de Cardoz, which was like a strong version of a Belgian wheat beer. Belgian wheat beer is usually spiced with curacao, orange peel, and coriander. Instead of that, we had Chef Floyd Cardoz, then of Tabla restaurant, 3-star Indian restaurant here in town, to design a blend of Indian spices to go into this beer. So 12 different spices it ended up being, including everything from chilies to toasted coconut. So that was fascinating. We worked with Dwayne Sorensen from Stumptown Coffee Roasters to make a beer called Intensified Coffee Stout, using their Finca El Injerto coffee, infused into a strong stout. We did a beer a few years ago, which actually now is becoming a permanent new beer for us, called Sriracha Ace, named after a hop variety of the same name, originally from Japan. Very distinctive flavor, smells like lemongrass, lemon verbena. Right. And every time we kept being about to run out of that beer, we always missed it. We felt bad that it was about to go away. So we decided that we were going to keep it. At the end of the day, I hate to tell you, we love everybody out there, but in fact, it's not about you. It's actually all about us, and what we want to do and what we want to drink.
Okay.
And also people we want to meet, that we want to do things with. We're working with wineries. We were the first brewery in the United States by a long shot to do collaborative brewing with other breweries. We've done many, many of them. And I'm sure we'll have more of those going on as well in the future. Well, beer and food is a big part of what we're about. We all cook. We now have a brew house cooking team. Me and two of the other brewers, cook for 25 or 30 people at a time, right in front of the audience, all done from scratch. And, we're not just frying sausages. We're doing, boneless quail stuffed with foie gras and truffles in a duck demi-glace. We're doing curried crab cakes. We're doing pasta carbonara. Everything made from scratch. And really, of course, paired with beer to demonstrate, the fact that the minds of the brewer and the mind of the chef are very similar, and actually brewing is a lot more like cooking than it is like winemaking. I kind of feel like mixologists and chefs are really our closest peers, as opposed to winemakers. Love them what we do. Now, we have collaborations going on right now with the Red Hook Winery over in Red Hook, Brooklyn, right, where Abe Scherner, who is famous, as a natural winemaker, is making some great wines. We're actually taking some of the wild yeast that they're fermenting their wines with, from the countryside in Long Island, and actually infusing that into some of our beers. And that becomes what we refer to as a ghost bottle. We have 15 or 20 things that are behind the scenes that are not sold to the public that we only bring out for events that represent some of our most cutting edge stuff. So if you were to walk around here, you'd see some, little 5-gallon carboys, big glass bottles, bubbling with this and bubbling with that, sometimes with wild yeast strains, things that at some point in the future, may become beers that make it out to the public. Well, no, they came to me in 2006, Oxford University Press, and said that they would like me to helm, the Oxford Companion to Beer, a first edition of it. And like, any normal, sane person, I went sprinting as quickly as possible in the opposite direction. I actually had a copy of the Oxford Companion to Wine. I had met Jancis Robinson when she was on her book tour for it. I had it sitting on a desk at home. I'd been through the whole book. I am, in fact, a wine geek and a cocktail geek. And, that definitely fed my geekery. So I knew how complex it was. And I didn't think there was any way that, I could possibly take on something like that. But friends and family convinced me that if I didn't do it, I would eventually be sorry that I hadn't taken the challenge. And I started to see that it was a book that the beer world really needed. There are a lot of things that happen in beer that, everything from dry hopping, for example, which is basically a technique used for every IPA virtually in the United States, adding hops after the main fermentation for extra flavor and aroma. Where can you read about how it's done in professional breweries? Nowhere. I mean, that's just one example of dozens. So I thought, this book was needed, and, I decided to take it on. And, these 4.5 years later, we have 1,120 some odd subjects, 166 writers from 24 countries. And the book's doing really well. It's in its fourth printing already. It's only been out for 9 weeks, and I think people are really glad to see it. I'll tell you the thing that I didn't expect, however, and that is that the book is actually really fun. I mean, it is informative, yes, but I think it's really fun. It's entertaining in the way that encyclopedias used to be entertaining. We used to read them when we were kids, grab S off the shelf and just open it up somewhere and start reading and wander off into snakes and spiders and space and whatever else was under S. And I think this is a book you can do that. It's A to Z. It basically is an encyclopedia, and you can read about pretty much anything, that you want, and a few things that you never thought you wanted to know about. But you catch it in the corner of your eye, and you go wandering off. And I think that it's a fun book to wander through. Many people think that craft beer is a trend or a fad. What they don't realize is that it's actually a return to normality. If you went back to the year 1900, what you would have found in New York City was the most fascinating food culture on the face of the earth, by far, and the most fascinating beer culture on the face of the earth. We don't think about it, as Americans. But, when we travel, you go to Italy and you go to eat the food, you don't notice the fact that they don't have many Thai restaurants and Korean restaurants and Mexican restaurants and all this. They have Italian restaurants, and that's what we went there for. But, the American says, oh, I don't want Italian. I had Italian yesterday. Or, I had Mexican for lunch. Nobody else in the world eats like us. We always had variety. And the same was true of our beer culture. In Brooklyn, we had 48 breweries in the year 1900. They made 10% of all the beer in the country. We had breweries that made nothing but Weiss beer, nothing but porter, specialists in pale ale, basically any kind of beer you could think of. And the tragedy of American food is that we lost everything. We managed to throw out the most interesting beer and food culture in the world. So all we're really doing now is getting it back. And the trend of American food, if you like, the arc of American food and the arc of American beer are the same arc. So the reason why you see all these craft beers out there is in fact the same reason why you see a whole wall full of olive oil at Whole Foods. People are going from a period where they thought of food as fuel, and it's something you just had to do, get it out of the way, to an elemental pleasure, that's going back to what it was always supposed to be. And I think that it's natural that, New York should always lead that trend. We always had more of everybody than anywhere. And as a result, we had more of everybody's food than everywhere, all of everybody's beer than any place else. And so I think that it's natural that New York City should be a great place to eat and a great place to drink again. And, craft beer is the great affordable luxury. For less than a cup of coffee at Starbucks, you can have something that can improve dinner every day. I mean, what else do you want? Cheers. Welcome to my world.